Andree de Jongh was born on November 30th, 1916, in Schaerbeek, Belgium, the young daughter of Frederick de Jongh, a schoolteacher. She was brought up to admire Edith Cavell, shot the year before Andree was born for helping Allied soldiers escape from Belgium during World War I. She was working as a commercial artist in May 1940 when the Germans absorbed Belgium. Having first aid training, she began working as a nurse. She quietly pored over the numerous German rules governing control of movement and conferred with confiance about escape. Derek Schuff, in his book Evader, told the 3 British crewmen whose bomber made a forced landing in 1941. They found their way to the underground and were ensconced in a safe house when a slip of a young woman appeared. "My name is Andree," the 24-year-old woman said, "but I would like you to call me by my code name, which is Dede. It means little mother. From here on, I will be your little mother, and you will be my little children. It will be my job to get my little children to Spain and freedom." She left, and the 3 sat in stunned silence. One finally spoke. "Our lives are going to depend on a schoolgirl," he said. The men survived the grueling trek with what became known as the Comet Escape Line, because of the speed of which soldiers were hustled along it. A young couple crawled through the heavy grasses growing on the banks of the Somme River, searching for a rowboat. Already the searchlights of German sentinels on patrol along the river had nearly exposed them. They were soon concluded that the boat was not there. After a hasty conference, they returned to the group of Belgians hidden nearby and explained that the boat was missing and all would have to swim across the river, where a young woman was waiting for them to hide them for the night. Because most of the group did not know how to swim, one of the guides, Andree de left to find some equipment and help the men cross the river. The other guide, Andree de Jongh, remained with them to manage any emergencies that might arise. The 13 men in the group were young Belgians who wanted to escape to England to join the war. Dede and Dupé were attempting to organize an escape line to evacuate Belgian patriots and many British servicemen who had been hiding in and around Brussels since the fall of Belgium and France the previous summer. This effort was a trial run. Although Dupé had made one trip through France and over the Pyrenees, Dede had not. And for the line to work effectively, both needed to be familiar with the route. Returning with a rope and an inner tube from an old tire, Dupé tied one end of the rope to a sturdy tree and swam across the river, where he anchored the other end. Dede helped a man onto the tube, and holding onto a rope, began propelling him through the water. The feeling of excitement helped to counter any fears she felt in creating a rush of energy that enabled her to swim across the river 25 times that night, pushing the men across while offering encouragement to calm their fears. The 2 guides led the men to Bayonne, from which Dupé took them across the Pyrenees and left them at a Spanish border. He gave them directions for reaching the British consul, and returned to the Bayonne to pick up Dede for the trip back to Brussels. Uplifted by the apparent success of the operation, the 2 guides returned to Belgium, making plans for a second trip. Dede de Jongh was a 25-year-old commercial artist who had volunteered her services as a Red Cross nurse soon after the Germans invaded Belgium. Armed with an intense hatred for all things German, she had organized a group of friends, including Dupé, to hide servicemen in their homes around Brussels. Though she did not discuss her work with her parents, she soon realized they knew what she was doing. Dede recalled an exchange with her mother that revealed her parents' awareness and concern. "I was phoning somebody, and there was no answer. I tried again. No answer. My mother was sewing, and quite naturally, she said to me, 'Perhaps they got arrested.' I made this as if it was a joke and said, 'You're saying funny things.' She said, 'But my daughter, you have to know, it always finishes like this.'" Dede de Jongh, chief of the Comet Escape Line, exhibited a tenacity and courage not often found in one so young. The route she organized for evaders enabled about 900 men to return to England and continue the fight against Germany. While Dede and Dupé worked together and established an escape line between Brussels and Spain, it was Dupé who made one of the most valuable of the line's helper connections. In June 1941, he traveled to Bayonne, in the southwestern corner of France, where he contacted M. Appert, secretary of the General Society Bank, who was known to be in contact with the resistance group. Dupé's visit coincided with an earlier visit to Appert by Elvire de Greef, who had also offered her services to assist Belgium. Remembering her visit, a pair gave Didi a password, Gogo is dead, prearranged by himself and Elvire, and sent him to the de Greef home. Fernand de Greef, husband of Elvire de Greef, found work as an interpreter for the German commander in that region. Elvire, known to all as Tante Go, as a result of the unusual password, became active in the black market trade, which proved useful for feeding airmen en route to Spain, and on occasion, as a means of blackmailing German soldiers. The work of the de Greef family proved vital to the escape line. From his office, Fernand stole blank identification cards, permits for crossing into the Atlantic zone, and stamps for making false papers. Tante Go housed airmen and organized several safe houses in the Bayonne region, where men stayed during the final stop of their journey before crossing the Pyrenees. In August 1941, Dede and Dupé prepared to convoy a second group of men to Spain because they disagreed on the safety of the main route. Dede took 3 men down a longer rural route, while Dupé took 6 more along the main thoroughfare from Brussels to Lille, intending to link with Dede in Corbie, just south of the Belgian border. The reasons why Dede chose the Basque Pyrenees as the best crossing point for the Comet Line are manifold, but not only did she have contacts in the area, but geographically, these mountains offer the lowest crossing point into Spain. However, this is still a very complex terrain to navigate. This job was the natural domain of the Basque smugglers, who had perfected the area of moving goods, animals, and people silently over these borders on dark, moonless nights, avoiding border guards and Guardia Civil alike. Their isolated farms and homesteads on the slopes of Pyrenees made ideal safe houses and resting points on both sides of the border. When Dupé did not appear, Dede took her men to Bayonne, where they rested briefly at Tante Go's house. She feels frustrated at the lack of news about Dupé, and the feelings increased when Tante Go gives her disappointing news about the Belgians they had aided on their last trip to Spain. All of them had been placed in concentration camps just after they crossed the Spanish border. Dede realized if the escape line was to work properly, she had to make contact with the British consulate in Spain so British authorities could collect the evaders as soon as they entered Spanish territory. Tante Go introduced Dede to Thomas Annabitart, a smuggler from Saint-Jean-de-Luz, who was experienced at crossing the mountains and had agreed to guide the men into Spain. However, Thomas was not thrilled with the idea of a woman along with him. Dede convinced him that she could keep up, and he allowed her to accompany him on the long trip. 12 hours the first night and 8 more the following night, at the end of which Dede presented herself to the British consulate at Bilbao. The British Vice Consul, Vivian Petrick, listened in amazement as the young woman told him where and why she had come to his office. He first thought she was a German plant, for surely this blue-eyed young lady wearing ankle socks and saddle Oxford could not have led 3 men across occupied France and over the Pyrenees mountains. But Dede's youthful, most fragile appearance belied her extraordinary strength of character. Dede explained that she had established an escape line from Brussels, but she needed help in financing the escape line, and a contact to whom she could release the men after they arrived in Spain. She did not want to see the men she had rescued land in prison camps after they crossed the border. Of the 3 servicemen Dede accompanied over the Pyrenees, only one was a British serviceman. The consul agreed to pay a specific amount for his return, but could not reimburse her for 2 Belgians escaping during German occupation. He asked her to return in a month with more men, preferably airmen, and agreed to forward her request to the British military intelligence in London. After returning to Bayonne after meeting with the British consul, Dede learned that Dupé had been betrayed and arrested, and her family in Brussels had been questioned by the Gestapo concerning Dede's whereabouts. Realizing that it no longer was safe to go home, she was contacted by her father, Frederick de Jongh, who agreed to take over the Belgian portion of the Comet Line. On January 15, 1943, German soldiers arrested Dede and a few airmen she was transporting along the Comet Line. A smuggler who had been dismissed from the line for dishonesty had betrayed the group to the Gestapo at Saint-Jean-de-Luz. Luckily, Florentino had escaped arrest by returning to his own house the night before. But Dede's work of the line was over. She had rescued 118 evaders since the first trip to Spain in August of 1941.